being so late. Tomorrow I'll be on time. More in time. Okay. Okay, I keep forgetting to change the first verse, the merits, to change it to accumulations. Okay, so I'll remember now. I haven't changed it yet, but I will later. So if I somehow go just be loud enough and say accumulations. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, all right. So let's set our motivation. Again, preceded by some breathing meditation, being mindful of the breath. And once again, visualize that you're in this sacred place of the Rajgriha Hills on top of Balchames Mountain. In the inspiring presence of the Buddha himself. Surrounded by the Sangha, Arhats, Bodhisattvas, monks, nuns, disciples from all walks of life. Purely practicing what the Buddha taught. Assisting others in their practice. And then think that you're surrounded by all sentient beings. Seated around you, the Buddha, his Sangha. Especially with those we may resent. who we avoid or who avoid us, right in front of us. And then being aware of all these sentient beings being thrown in the ocean of samsara, helplessly and uncontrollably. By their root misperception and their self-centeredness. Constantly creating the causes for more suffering. Try to generate a deep sense of care and affection for each one of them. A sense of closeness and endearment. Without leaving out a single person, a single being. And then let's focus specifically on all their dissatisfactory experiences, their problems and difficulties. And aspire from the depth of your heart, may I be able to free each and every sentient beings from this dissatisfactory existence and their causes. May I be able to free them from such a state. Help them to overcome those. And that great compassion then gives way to the altruistic attitude. That is a kind of inner strength characterized by great courage and determination. Thinking that I will do all I can, dedicate this life and all my future lives towards helping sentient beings to find a way to liberation and even enlightenment. based on these affectionate, compassionate and loving minds, then generate the mind of enlightenment. The aspiration or determination to become fully enlightened. To be able to benefit, help sentient beings in the most effective way. And think that all throughout the day, whatever I do, especially studying, contemplating and meditating on this sutra, is dedicated towards the benefit of all sentient beings. And so then bring back the visualization of the Buddha and the Sangha as you take refuge, and hold on to your mind of enlightenment as we do the prayers and take some breaks in between to reflect on their meaning. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my accumulations of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my accumulations of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my accumulations of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. Okay. So we've done around half of the Heart Sutra. What do we learn so far? We learned about the title given in Sanskrit and then its Tibetan translation, about the length being one section, which covers, in this case, 25 verses, if they were written in verse instead of prose. We learned about the homage paid by the translators, with this part that I just mentioned so far actually all being added by the translators, especially the Tibetan title, for instance, and also the specification as to the length of the text. And then the actual sutra starts by way of a prologue first. The prologue has two parts, a common and an uncommon prologue. Here there's some discussion, some debate as to who speaks the prologue. Is it Ananda, a close disciple of the Buddha, a disciple of the fundamental vehicle, said to be a nephew as well, always be around the Buddha and having the ability to remember many of the teachings? So was it him? Was it Manjushri? Was it someone else? The point being, it was someone close to the Buddha who could remember this particular teaching that took place on Valchamess Mountain. And it is said that the common prologue describes a place, the audience, the time, the audience, and the teacher. Describes those briefly, the teacher being the Bhagavan, or in Tibetan, the destroyer endowed transcendent, the endowed transcendent destroyer. There's actually a prayer that starts with those words in Tibetan, in English. Anyway, the place, of course, this very sacred place, sacred in many religions, the audience being special practitioners. They say they were so special, their minds were ripe at that time. They were ready to receive these teachings without misunderstanding them. So without even getting a commentary and explanation, they knew exactly what was meant. With beings from other realms, celestial beings arriving there as well. Anyway, and after the prologue, which is a permitted speech in the sense that it's actually considered to be a speech of the Buddha, by the Buddha, because the Buddha gave the permission to exactly give, he encouraged this, he permitted to give this particular introduction. And then there's the uncommon prologue, which is not as obvious to us or obvious to the people present. The Buddha engaged in that meditative equipoise. Although I need to add, meditative equipoise can be a little bit misleading because the Buddha doesn't meditate. A Buddha doesn't need to meditate. Meditation means to familiarize yourself with something that you haven't previously familiarized yourself with. Well, the Buddha has familiarized with himself with everything that can be familiarized with, realizing all phenomena. So there are a few things that may be important to understand about a Buddha. A Buddha doesn't take refuge. Why would you take refuge? We take refuge on the basis of fear or concern, apprehension with regard to the suffering existence or with regard to our obstructions. The Buddha has overcome these obstructions. The Buddha doesn't have faith, because faith implies, at least the Tibetan term implies, you don't know. You don't know yet, so therefore you have faith. I mean, we talk about three types of faith. So believing faith, the Buddha doesn't believe anything because he knows, right? If you know, why would you believe it? You know. Joyful faith is kind of devotion. It's a joyful devotion in an entity who has greater qualities than yourself. Well, there is no living being who's got greater qualities. All Buddhas have equal great qualities, equally great qualities. The difference between them is their karmic connections to sentient beings because of their previous existence as non-Buddhas. So they have special connections with some sentient beings and lesser connections with other sentient beings, which is why they can be very effective in some places, but not as effective in others, which is why we need more and more Buddhas to have karmic connections. And nowadays, those on the way to Buddhahood, those great bodhisattvas who we have the fortune to be around, the great masters, many of them, if they're not enlightened, they're Buddhas. You may notice they always try to make connections with other people. Try to make connections with other people, as many as possible. So someone who doesn't understand that may feel, oh, they just want to be popular, right? They see it from a very kind of limited, from our perspective, I mean, that may be our intention when we try to meet a lot of people, right? But of course, for such a being, their own concern is secondary. They eat, they drink, they keep healthy for the benefit of sentient beings, right? Of course, they may even do exercise. They want to live a long life to be of greatest benefit. However, their focus is others mainly. And so they want to meet as many people as they can and make this connection so that once they're enlightened, and even before that, there's this connection and they can help these beings. So this connection is important. And we all know about this connection. How many times did you meet someone and you felt, I met that person before? That's why I say jokingly. There's no love on first sight. You've probably been with them in a previous life. There's no love on first sight, right? When you meet someone and it's like, wham, I'm going to marry that person. Yeah, big deal. You were probably married to them a few lifetimes before, so you're just meeting again. Why else? The chemicals, they're just in tune, right? Yeah. I mean, even from far away, they don't smell their chemicals, right? So, I mean, we're trying to explain it away, but honestly, we've had these connections with people over many lifetimes. They keep changing, of course, but in some cases, they remain the same for some time until your connection, it wanes off, and of course, you go your own way, and they go, and things change again. But it's oftentimes, even as a being born, you have one particular karma. You remember I talked about throwing karma or propelling karma? One karma can propel you a few times into such an existence. It's got into the same existence or similar existence. It has the power to do so. Yeah, so you find that in many of the Lamrim teachings, in the Lamrim texts. It could be one karma throwing you in one existence. It could be a few karmas acting together to throw you in one existence. It could be one karma throwing you in several existences, one after the other. It could be several karmas throwing you into so many possibilities. But the point being that oftentimes we meet the same people. And we all probably had the experience when we met someone and maybe we were scared of them or we didn't like them. That's also a possibility. There's one nun, when I first met her, I was really scared of her. I have no idea why. And it disappeared after some time when I got to know her. There's nothing scary about her. I was thinking maybe I did something bad to her, so now I'm scared of her. Who knows, right? I remember that. So anyway, we have those different relationships with people, and we remember. Okay, so that accounts for past lives. But if you're a bodhisattva and you're willingly reborn for the benefit of sentient beings, you want to connect to all these beings. I can help this person. Oh, just a worm. Oh, please, a worm, come on. One day, let me guide you, right? It seems bizarre, but based on the understanding that even the worm, even the mosquito, they're caught in this little body right now. But the mind doesn't have any shape as such. So it can be a tiny organism, it can be a huge elephant, right? The mind can be reborn in those states. And now, scientists know that animals always acting on instinct. That is not true. I mean, or for that matter, we all act on instinct as well. We could say we also act on instinct. No, they also make certain decisions. When I've heard that chicken, when one of the chicken in their flock is in distress, their heart rate goes up and they start getting really agitated. So it agitates them when there's another chicken in distress, right? Or we all know the elephants who are trying to save this other elephant baby, and sometimes they actually succeed doing so. So, and dogs, oh my God, I mean, monkeys are so clever. Parrots, some of them are so clever. And some of them are just a little stubborn, I'm sure cats could do certain things, but they're like, I've got an attitude. Right? So, anyway, if you have pets, you get to know the personality. And even babies, when my nieces and nephews were born, it was very clear, there was a very clear personality. This baby knew what it wanted. It wasn't like what is it? A blank slate? You know, it's like there was already something there. Of course, a lot of the sense of I and identity, etc., had to still develop, but that they were a specific personality was very clear, quite different from their siblings, despite their, well, having the same parents, similar upbringing. And how huge can the differences be? And so, yeah, they lay on that side of the womb. So they're good at mathematics. You know, like how people try to, I mean, I'm exaggerating here. It's not like they explain it away with where they lay, but I don't know. Sometimes we just don't find a cause for that and come up with absurd solutions. But it would totally explain it that they lived before, that there is a continuation of this consciousness which has certain tendencies, likes, dislikes, certain abilities, etc., which accounts for even identical twins. Well, they're not that identical. They're totally identical at conception, and then actually their DNA, although it's identical, it slightly changes. I mean, even our DNA changes. We had some kind of karmic glue version of events when we first thought DNA was like you're caught in that DNA. And then over time, scientists found that, well, the DNA keeps changing actually. Right? It changes slightly to such a degree that people change as well. Their personalities change due to our environment and so forth. But anyway, even identical twins born with the same DNA and then a very similar DNA, sometimes the differences between them cannot be found in their DNA, cannot be found in their upbringing. So what else would it be, right? I mean, I've been teaching for a while a text called the Pramanavartika by Dharmakirti. Holmes actually asked me to translate it, and I added some comments on it. It's really difficult to work on it. I only got half through, and now I've got some other work, but when I'm done with that other work, I'll go back to it. And it's amazing. It's so amazing, so deep. Unfortunately, when you study it the way we study it in the institutions, you can't go into that depth. There's not enough time. But if you got the time to dig into it, the reasonings on why there's reincarnation, it blows your mind. It blows your mind. It's incredible. And then bringing it together with modern science, it's genius. It's really amazing. That's why I really like to continue on that, because I think, usually it's the text that is referred to talk of previous lives, talk of reincarnation. Anyway, I totally lost what I actually took off to. So what did I start talking about? I talked about the Buddha giving the permission to give these teachings. The Buddha then being in this meditative equipoise, the Buddha doesn't have to meditate. Okay. So anyway, let's go back. Travel back to Vulture Peaks Mountain. Cool breeze, calm, not much blah blah. Okay. So there, the Buddha is meditating. That's the situation described, or not meditating. It seems the Buddha were meditating. Of course, he doesn't meditate. And then there's Avalokiteshvara, inspired by the Buddha, blessed by the Buddha, to also reflect on emptiness, which in turn also inspires Shariputra to ask Avalokiteshvara this question. This also implies that this is the way to go about it. You have a teacher who has high realization, such as the Buddha, full enlightenment, who teaches his disciple, like Avalokiteshvara, who practices exactly that and passes it on to the next person in the way of learning from each other, asking questions, answering those, and so forth. And so Shariputra, therefore, asked this question: how should someone who has the Mahayana lineage, or the lineage of the universal vehicle, in other words, who's generated bodhicitta, who's generated the mind of enlightenment, who's now entered the Mahayana path because of that aspiration, that uncontrived aspiration, how should they now practice? In particular, when it comes to emptiness, how should they practice? So when it says the activity and so forth, it really means how do they go about it? How should they utilize this? Practice it mentally, verbally, physically, but mainly mentally, of course. In terms of the 5 aggregates also. So in terms of the self, in terms of the aggregates, that which makes up the aggregates, how should they understand the way phenomena really exist when it comes to our reality, when it comes to our world. So, in the version that we read, it actually only mentions sons of the lineage, but then in the answer, and I said earlier, in some Sanskrit version, apparently it says both, sons and daughters of the lineage, even as part of the question. But then as part of the answer, of course, Avalokiteshvara, it's very clear, sons and daughter should behold, should look upon the five aggregate in such a way that they understand, they lack, that they first infer, subsequently know, subsequent to understanding the different reasonings, that phenomena lack inherent existence, that in particular, the self and the five aggregates lack inherent existence. That's what we need to know, that's what we need to understand. So, that is the concise answer, which also indicates or implies the path of accumulation, as we've heard. And then he goes on to say, form is empty, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, and so forth. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, because a compositional factor in consciousness, all empty, right? Indicating or implying the path of preparation, where you, instead of merely inferentially realizing emptiness, you now realize it in union with a deep level of concentration. Still a conceptual mind, but very focused. Until then, through your meditation, through familiarizing yourself time and again with this mind. So what does that mean? Are you meditating all day long? No. The practice of the Dharma needs to be balanced, like everything. Diet, exercise, all that needs to be balanced. Balanced in this case means, well, while you're practicing, you have the method aspect and the wisdom aspect, which are like the wings, the two wings of a bird, right? So just as a bird needs both wings, needs to find a balance between using those two, likewise, we need to find a balance between method and wisdom. At times, a bodhisattva engages in the practice of wisdom on the path of preparation, for that matter, and on the path of accumulation as well. And at times, in the practice of the method, because they support each other, and you can't, if you just focus on one, you fall into an extreme, and you won't be able to proceed also in terms of the other aspect. And also there are times when taking a rest. That doesn't mean, you remember previously I said, once you have bodhicitta, all your actions become part of your practice. But, I mean, even sleeping becomes a cause for enlightenment. But that doesn't mean you can be sleeping all the time just because you have the motivation that this may bring you to enlightenment. No, there are times when taking a rest, there are times when eating, when exercising, and there are times when engaging in serious meditation. Now, sometimes we believe meditation can only take place if we have a comfortable cushion in the right color, the right shape, the right sign and place, the right incense. Everyone needs to shut up and be silent. No snoring, no funny sounds, right? No getting up and leaving. No, I'm meditating, right? We have that sense. Of course, it's conducive, but not absolutely necessary. And what you need to learn to do is to meditate, to reflect on certain points, even when you're brushing your teeth. You can do that, right? I mean, you read a book, you read the text. The first step anyway is to contemplate it, to reflect on it, to give it some time, to get a deeper understanding. So that's, some would even call that meditation, but it's the first level to the deeper kind of internalizing. But even that is needed, and it affects our actions. So there's so many opportunities when we usually just daydream, right? So driving a car, whatever, you can think of the Dharma everywhere. And a lot of people do. I mean, many of the practitioners It's always on their mind. You can tell because just the way they talk to you, they talk to other people, you can tell the Dharma is always on their mind. They're always reflecting on it. So that's great, because we always feel like we don't have enough time. I don't have time to practice the Dharma. There's so much time. There's so much time when we're on autopilot, and we can do so much at the same time, right? So to make it a habit, and in that way, if we grow more familiar, when trouble strikes, when problems arise, we know what to do. We're so familiar with it, right? We stay calm. We remember, it's samsara. Of course, it was bound to happen. Okay, but we also remember it's impermanent. Oh, there's the thought problem, and then already it's changing. There's the thought, great, I've been praised. It's already changing. I got something, I gained something. Oh, it's already changing, right? Therefore, it's important, these concepts, and there's so much more. It lacks inherent existence. If you give it some time and every day reflect on something, maybe take a topic that you in the morning reflect on. Don't get too attached to mindfulness meditation. It's a wonderful meditation to get very attached to. Right? Oh, just the breath. Oh, my problems are gone. There's just the breath. But your problems are not gone. You've just put them to the side and they come back. You haven't solved them. It's like taking a sleeping pill. No, it's better than taking a sleeping pill. Of course, I'm exaggerating. But it is necessary to practice mindfulness. It's part of our... So don't neglect your practice of mindfulness. But it needs to be balanced. I meet people who meet the Dharma, I don't know, these different concepts, and they find it tiring and overwhelming. I studied in university for so long, now I need to study even more. I just want to take a break. I want to get to calm abiding. And for the next 10 years, that's all they do. Calm abiding, calm abiding. I mean, it's important to teach it, it's important to practice it, but not at the exclusion of everything else. I think that's important, not to get too attached. It's easy to get attached to it because there's no worries. You're focused on something else. Your mind is free from all worry. But our root misperception is still there. So that analytical is very helpful with a calm, curious mind, right? So Mike once asked me about this, how to deal with certain emotions, right? Like fear, for instance. We're so lucky we have this fear and stuff. There's our petri dish right there. Use your fear to analyze it, right? Even when you're angry, when you get angry, fear is a little harder because sometimes it's so deep within and we're scared of the fear. The anger, we're usually angry that we got angry, especially as Buddhists. Right? I got so angry, I'm so stupid, such a bad Buddhist. No. Instead of getting caught in that kind of attitude, no. All right, I've been angry. Can't undo it. It's done. It's okay. But let me go back in time. How did I get from A to B? How did I get from a person doing something, or I don't know, whatever I thought the person did, and then analyze it. It's fresh in your memory. And sit down, go to the bathroom, for Christ's sake, if you can't find a silent spot, find a Western toilet. They may be squatting for a long time. I'm kidding. But, anyway, sit there, wherever you sit. And then start going, oh, why? What happened? What happened? First this, and then that, and then this. How did I get there? And how amazing, how curious. Instead of blaming yourself and beating yourself up and gosh, no. Oh, great opportunity, once again, to understand it better and see where can I hold it next time, right? Maybe count to 5 as the Japanese would. The Japanese, when they're about to get really angry, they count to 5. And the momentum is often lost, right? 1, 2, 3. Why was I upset? Right? So count to 5 or whatever. So anyway, it helps you to understand that chain of events in first there's self-centeredness, then there's the exaggerating, and there's bits in between. I mean, it's individually quite different. And analyze it. Or fear. fear, for instance. We all have certain fears. Sometimes they'll go back to the time when we were very little. So it's almost like you have to dig within your consciousness. And sometimes it pops up because there's a trigger and we're like overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, like, oh my God, oh, fear. And we just want to push it away. To learn to step out of the fear. To develop that kind of mind that is curious. Oh, what an interesting emotion. Don't identify with it. You're not your fear. Why do we say my fear? Okay? So don't identify with it. Watch it. It's an emotion. It is not a stick or stone that can hit you over the head. It's just a mind that comes with a certain energy. That's it. Comes and goes. It's impermanent. But watch it. Right? Kind of sit back. Almost like you trying to bring it back and watch it. Don't get sucked into it. Look at it from the outside. Check it. Where could that come from? Embrace it. Because if you push it away, it comes back stronger. No, when you embrace it with that acceptance and curiosity and a slight sense of humor. Slight sense of humor is good, right? So look at it, and you find a way to analyze it. Where does it come from? And before you know, that was the last time you ever had fear. It's like Lama Yeshe said, become your own therapist. Well, another person helps you to do it with mindfulness and this analytical faculty of like looking at it and not being sucked into it. You can deal with anything, right? You just need to have the courage and the curiosity to do it. And the understanding that it's nothing that can harm you. It's just an emotion. Yeah? But of course I can talk all day long. You need to try it. With emotions, you don't find that scary. Try with a small one. Try with one that doesn't, I don't know, make you topple over and I don't know, throws you into a depression or something. Start with some little things. And once you've done the little things, you've got the self-confidence. Oh my God, I could deal with that. Next one, what's next? Right? It's amazing. And it's all part of embracing ourselves and accepting ourselves and not identifying so much. These are just states of mind. There were causes and conditions that gave rise to them. And okay, we're in cyclic existence. So it's not surprising that there are many different emotions that are unpleasant, to say the very least. Okay, so anyway, going back. Once again, going back. Now, what I talked about before I got off again was the path of seeing now, or path of reparation, familiarizing ourselves, and we can do this in different ways. Of course, we may also have to spend some time, of course, on the meditation cushion, totally focused. But through this familiarity, dealing with it at all times, the nature of our mind is such that eventually, even when we realize emptiness conceptually, with, of course, concentration, and there's a concept of emptiness, very strong concept that we rely on, even that can disappear through familiarity so that we can experience something directly, such as emptiness, most importantly. So realizing emptiness directly, which marks the path of seeing. When, as we heard yesterday, we start to overcome, we start to eliminate with their seeds, together with the seeds, the afflictions. So the afflictions together with their seeds, we overcome, but not all of them. The coarsest ones, which are the acquired ones. Okay? So the coarsest ones, the ones acquired in this lifetime, those we eliminate, and then we can never, ever have acquired misperceptions and the resulting acquired, well, we can no longer have the acquired root misperception and the other misperceptions, the other afflictions that arise from that root misperception that are acquired. So all in terms of the acquired types, those ones can never ever arise again. So the ones we've already developed in this life, and we could potentially develop in a future life, none of those can ever arise in our mind again. So we're never ever fooled by any kind of distorted philosophy and so forth that suggests there's a certain type of I. That won't happen. Okay, but that's just the path of seeing. And that is what is implied in the words we heard yesterday about the 8 aspects. So we heard about the 8 aspects explicitly. What is described are the 8 aspects, which are empty, being without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. We analyzed emptiness, anyway, we analyzed that, without characteristics. We heard why we talk about a characteristic, that even that is just labeled. A characteristic, an attribute, is just labeled. Likewise, when we talk about something being produced, okay, the word produced is not a word we usually use for seeds and flowers, right? It's more like a factory produces goods. But anyway, it's a term that is, there's a particular term in Tibetan and it's a little difficult to translate it. Sometimes the word is translated as to generate something, to produce something, to generate something. So a cause produces something, it gives rise to something, it generates something. And everything that is impermanent is both a cause and a result. Very important. Whatever is changing moment by moment is always a cause. At the very least, it is a cause of its next moment. Everything that is impermanent has a cause, is a cause, is a result, and has a result. Whoa. Everything that is impermanent is both a cause and an effect, a cause and a result. Why is it a result? Because it has a cause. Why is it a cause? Because it has a result. Am I making sense? And it's always part of a continuum. Every impermanent phenomenon is both a cause and a result. Why is it a cause? Or what is it? Why is it a result? Because it's a result of its preceding cause, of its preceding moment, if you like. Why is it a cause? Because it has a result. It produces its later moment. Okay? And then, of course, there are different causes, but never mind, even without going into those. So everything is a continuum. And so on that basis, again, there are certain reasonings that account for rebirth. Because every impermanent phenomenon is part of a continuum. It has a former moment of a similar type, and it has a later moment of a similar type. So why am I saying similar type? Because, for instance, a sprout, a sunflower sprout, is not preceded by a rice seed. It's not that the rice seed transforms and becomes a sunflower. It just doesn't. It doesn't have the potential to do so. Therefore, a sunflower sprout, for instance, or seedling as it's sometimes called, must be preceded by a particular cause, such as a sunflower seed. And that was, again, preceded by a particular cause. So just being a cause and an effect at the same time is not sufficient. Just being impermanent is not sufficient, but you must arise from a cause, or it must be a result of a cause that has the potential to give rise to it. And when it itself gives rise to a later effect, it also must have the potential to give rise to such an effect. Very important. Which takes us to the fact that in terms of this, what time is it? Which takes us to the fact, I don't want to have to miss this. Someone has to tell her later, okay? Okay, please tell her later. Okay, so you must have, therefore, a certain characteristics that they share, which is why also a physical object must always be preceded by something physical. Only something physical can transform into something physical. right? Only something physical. So an atom, for instance, it must have been preceded by another atom, and that was preceded by another atom. Does that make sense? Or something of a similar type. Maybe call it energy, whatever. But energy is something physical. So it preceded by that. So think of the Big Bang. We say the beginning of this universe was the Big Bang. Was it the beginning of everything? No way. It's not out of nothing. You suddenly had everything. The Big Bang couldn't have taken place unless there was something before. And something before that. Which takes us to something quite dissatisfactory, because we like our beginnings and we like our ends. We like it clear-cut and concrete, which is beginning and end. Now, sorry, on basis of the physical existence, there's no beginning. What would be the beginning? Was there a time when there was nothing and suddenly there was something physical? Impossible. Does that make sense? Impossible. So everything physical must be preceded by something physical as well. So beginningless. Sorry, on a physical plane. And even if you were to accept it was created by God, even God must have been endless. Because otherwise something created God and God would not be the creator of everything. Right? So then again you end up with having something endless. Yeah. And then what about the mind? Mind is not physical, it's non-physical. It must also be preceded by something non-physical. It cannot be preceded by something, just as a rice seed does not give rise to a sunflower, as in like the rice seed transforming, giving rise to the sunflower, that doesn't happen. And similarly, how could something physical become a mind? A mind also couldn't give rise to something physical. It's not like a mental state, an experiencing entity suddenly grows into a sunflower. That'd be absurd. So not only does the physical not have the potential to give rise to something mental, such as consciousness, consciousness doesn't have the ability to give rise to something. It can, of course, influence something physical, but it cannot, as such, transform and become something physical. Impossible. And actually, we ourselves know within this life that a mental state is preceded by a mental state. Because when you know there's an exam tomorrow, you don't pop pills, right? You may do that to support your stay awake and be able, but you study. You know, in order to get the mind that is ready to take the exam, you need to have a mind that trains itself. We have that instinctive sense. We know that, right? It's not like we have to learn this from small onwards, like, oh, if I want to do so, if any kind of physical result, if we hope for a physical result, for a mental result, a certain mental result, we know we need to create the cause on a mental level, right? I want to memorize a poem. I'm not going to pop pills and do exercise. No, I memorize the poem. We know that. We all know that. To study for an exam, to memorize a poem, to do anything mental, to be able to calculate numbers. We know I have to train in that first to understand how to do so. So we actually know that. And somehow, throughout our entire life, we know that. But for the first moment, we insist it must be our parents' DNA. The first moment of awareness, right? When there's consciousness for the first time, whenever that is, whether that's at the moment of conception, yeah, actually from a Buddhist point of view, there is a very subtle mind at that time. We just don't remember it. But big deal, I don't remember what I did last year on that same day, right? On the same date. So that we don't remember doesn't mean it didn't happen. However, at the first moment of conception, there was awareness. That awareness was preceded by what? God created it. Or, right? Usually, right? Either God created it, or our parents, or a petri dish, or whatever. Like we have these funny ideas in that moment because we can't, it's difficult for us reincarnation, not all of us actually, but for some of us, especially when we come from the very materialistic West, right? Very materialistic West. Yeah, it's not just, I'm not just talking about our whole lives around revolving around material objects, but also the difficulty in accepting that our consciousness existed before, that it must have been preceded by a similar entity, which is also a conscious entity, which doesn't necessarily, just that in itself doesn't prove reincarnation. You could also say, well, I lived in a Pure Land since the beginning of time in the form of a consciousness, and now I was born into, right? But it's the first step towards accepting reincarnation, that consciousness is always preceded by consciousness. And I don't think my mom's consciousness or my dad's consciousnesses, they merged and became my consciousness, right? Then all their knowledge should really be, I should be able to know math and all that, everything my parents knew, that should have been transferred. So it's not like their consciousness merged into mine. They're not similar enough for me to say that my consciousness is a continuation of my parents' consciousness, that suddenly their consciousness kind of branched out and that branch became me and the other one my sibling, right? Doesn't make sense. Therefore, consciousness being preceded by a former moment of consciousness, which, again, former moment, and the reason why, when I was conceived, those stem cells, why did they become a heart and a limb and so forth? The karmic force, right? Why do stem cells, from a Buddhist point of view, yeah, stem cells make perfect sense. A stem cell then grows into a kidney, it grows. That is the karmic force that now is part and parcel of this newly conceived being in the form of a fertilized egg. Starts dividing, the cells start to divide. They only do when there's a consciousness in there. Otherwise, they stop doing that, right? When the being is dead, the cell division stops. When is it dead? When there's no consciousness. Yes?
How does stem cell research work then if you're growing organs without a consciousness?
Yeah, well, is it like, are you actually taking the fertilized egg? And that is a little bit, a little difficult. If you take a fertilized egg, if you take some stem cells, you just contract them, no problem, right? Contract some stem cells, new stem cells are going to, but if you take the entire, that is like an abortion, right? Okay, so from a Buddhist point of view, it is actually taking a life. But in Buddhism, it's like, if it serves a greater purpose, I mean, okay, I don't want to get into this too much, but let me give you the example of a mother who's pregnant with her 7th child. If she has the child, she's going to die, and the other children may starve. Then an abortion is, because, so common sense. Let's use common sense. But in general, stem cell research, it just depends where's the source. Are you extracting some stem cells from an embryo that continues to develop, or are you actually, okay. Anyway, I don't want to go into the morals of stem cells research, but stem cell research. But the point is basically that it's the karmic force that leads to the development of this being. However, without going into that too far, consciousness must be preceded by consciousness. Okay, and that accounts for reincarnation. Just as physical objects must be preceded by physical objects. Does that make sense? And so, if you take it from there and you think about it. You think of your own mind. This is where reincarnation can actually be understood better by watching your own mind. How there's always a previous moment. How there's always a previous moment. Always a previous moment. Always a previous moment. And you go back and go back and go back. And people who do this, past life recessions, they actually sometimes go back and there's consciousness even before they were conceived. Right? There's consciousness, so they realize, and that can be scary at first if you really believe there is no reincarnation. And suddenly, wow, there were conscious moments before that. Again, taking it back. But what I'm trying to do now, we're basically have gone through the essence of this Heart Sutra, the heart of the Heart Sutra, and now I want to bring in all these other factors that are all connected to it, because we've still got time. The rest of it's not that hard to explain. And I want to be sure you only have a few puzzle pieces, emptiness, and then you're missing the rest. So that's why I'm going in all these directions. But of course, I need to bring it back again. So, therefore, being produced. Something is produced at the very least by the previous moment. And everything that is produced is impermanent. And what is impermanent was preceded by a similar type, which gave rise to it, and it itself transforms again to give rise to its next moment. So impermanence is just another way of saying each moment transforms to become its effect, and that in turn transforms to become its effect, right? So each moment of you is the cause of your future moment. So the food you eat determines, or the exercise you do determines what kind of physical moment you have tomorrow, the day after, and when you're 70. With your mind, the actions you perform with your mind determine your mind tomorrow, the next day, at the time of death, and where you're going to go in your next life. Most importantly, right? And here we need to be careful, because robbing a bank may make us wealthy in this life, but the continuum of the mind that continues to the next life as a result of that robbery, it won't be wealth. The result of stealing, you can't take anything with you. And the result of stealing, well, corresponds to the action. Does that make sense? So this is where we really need to be careful, because whereas we leave the body behind, so okay, eat a lot of sugar and very salty food your entire life, okay, too bad when you're older, you know, you've got a lot, but at least you leave the body behind. But the mind, of course, I don't encourage any of you to eat unhealthy. I'm just saying it's worse what we put in our mind. And this is why His Holiness Dalai Lama always mentions physical hygiene, saying in the West, there's this whole movement of, he calls it physical hygiene. It's not just physical hygiene as such in the literal sense of the word, but it also includes healthy decisions we make, right? Like we're really conscious about our physical well-being, which I think is good. In general, that's great, right? I mean, we live longer, we live happier. I mean, we have less diseases. Happier means in terms of physical well-being, less diseases, less problems. Very good. But we neglect our physical, our mental hygiene, right? I mean, it's crazy. There's an article in some influential newspaper that kale is really good for you, and tomorrow the sale of kale hits the roof because everyone, you know, opts for these superfoods, right? Superfood. I don't want to eat anything else, just superfood because I want it quick and so forth. So it's all good, but when it comes to the mental, anger is really bad for you. No one cares. Love is really good for you. Well, totally secondary. Right? Anger, just a moment of anger, it can be so destructive. It can destroy a lot of positive karma. A moment. Right? It acts similar to the body. Certain chemicals, it destroys this nerve and that nerve. Oh, we're petrified of that. But anger and aggression, it destroys positive karma that we made an effort to accumulate. Doesn't seem to be real. Can't be seen. It's not on CNN. No. Right? No one talks about it. Well, slowly things start. They do talk about the negative effects of anger, for instance, just in terms of blood pressure and what is this? Cortisone. That's right. Yeah. So these chemicals that actually harm our immune system, they actually start talking about it. But besides that, the physical, the mental is totally, and we only the body for a few years. The life, the mind, we're with for so much longer, and we pay so little attention to it. Isn't that crazy? And we harm ourselves so much in that way. Anyway, understanding production, the way it's set forth in the Buddhist text. So production, as I just said, a cause being produced by its former moment at the very least. And there are other factors, of course, that assist that production, but without going into too many details. But that doesn't exist inherently. So let's look at it on the conventional level, but not neglect the ultimate level. And then ceasing. What does it mean to cease? I mean, of course, the moment now, my mental consciousness now, a moment later, it's gone. A moment later, it has given rise to its result. Okay, my thoughts are right now. My consciousness right now is unique in the sense it has a certain object right now. I mean, I perceive the objects in this room. My consciousness perceives the objects in this room. But a moment later, these objects have changed. On a molecular level, on an atomic level, on a subatomic level, all these objects have changed. So obviously the object is no longer the same. And I change as well. My minds, my reaction to certain things, all that is individually different from moment to moment. My thoughts are different. They're never exactly the same. And so from moment to moment, my mind changes into something else. And so when my mind, the mind right now, has changed, has become the second moment, we can say that previous moment right now has ceased. But to have ceased, while it existed, it must be ceasing, right? Because any past must be preceded by the future. Any past activity must have been preceded by the present activity. I looked at the sky. When I say I looked at the sky, that must have been preceded by a time when I was looking at the sky. Does that make sense? If I say tomorrow, oh, I looked at the sky yesterday afternoon, well, by implication, unless I lied about it, by implication, there was a time in the afternoon today that I was looking at the sky. Now, if a second moment, like let's say in the next hour, my consciousness, my present consciousness has ceased. It's no longer there, it's ceased, right? It's gone, has gone out of existence. There must have been a time when it was ceasing. When was that? When it was present. So I label ceasing and ceased on the basis of what? In independence on the future, when it's no longer there, and independence on the fact that it's there right now, I label ceasing. And on the basis of these two, but now taking the perspective of the future mind, I labeled ceased. Is there an inherent ceasing and producing, somehow walking along with me as my mind is changing? No, there isn't. It's just label, right? Right? On the basis of these changes, and one moment giving rise to the next, I say, it's being produced, it has been produced, it's ceasing, it has ceased. That's all. That's all. Right? Therefore, conventionally, is there producing having been produced? Is there ceasing having ceased? Absolutely. Conventionally, nominally, there is, but not ultimately. Because that would mean beyond being merely labeled, it has some solid existence. Impossible. Does that make sense? Then there's stainless. Like a Buddha's mind is without stains. Stain, it's got negative, it's like dirt. Stain, pollution, dirt. It's got a negative connotation. But why? Remember I gave you I told you the story? Oh, there's a lot to report to her. Hope she's okay. She may be sick. No, don't go. Please afterwards check with her, see whether she's okay, because she's been gone for a while. Should we take a break? No, we don't need to take a break yet. I've only been talking for an hour and a half. This time it seems longer. Not even an hour and a half. Okay, anyway. So, stain, being a stain, it has a negative connotation. means it's something negative. It's something that is there that we don't want to be there. Go back to the example I told you yesterday. It's only in relation to what we want. Instinctively, and here I'm using the word instinctively, innately, this doesn't even have anything to do with the afflictions. That we want to be happy and peaceful, that has nothing to do with the afflictions. If it was the afflictions, it would be a problem. If it was just governed by the afflictions, then when we got rid of the afflictions, we wouldn't want to be happy or not. But there's still that instinctive need, if you want, of the mind to be calm. It's just its natural state. It's just its natural. The natural state of the mind is to be. That's supposed to be the way it is. You know, like water's not supposed to be dirty or whatever. It's supposed to have certain qualities to be able to exist in that form, right? A tree is supposed to, in order to be healthy and to be well, it needs certain substances and it needs the absence of other substances. So likewise, for our mind to be healthy, and then it needs to be free from suffering, from this dissatisfactory state. And in order to be free from that dissatisfactory state, we need to get rid of the causes, which I described as stains. Right? Stains. But is there an inherent stainless mind? No. Because maybe only on the basis of what these stains give rise to, and in dependence on the fact that their results is something no one likes, we label stain. Does that make sense? So I say a stain, like a mind that is a stain. It's just another way of saying a harmful mind. A harmful mind. An obstructive mind. A harmful mind is not just labeled harmful because it brings us suffering, but it's also an obstructive mind because it prevents us from finding peace and happiness. It has this preventive, or we label preventive because that's one of its functions. It prevents us from being successful in certain things. It acts as an obstacle. It is a stain in that, for instance, clear water, or not clear water, we wouldn't call it, like this object, if you think of this as like a clear crystal ball. Sometimes the mind is compared to a crystal ball, right? Or like to a crystal. A crystal, when there's some smear outside, that is described as a stain, right? It's interesting because they use these different analogies to describe the mind. Either it's water, so then you speak of like defilements, just as water has defilements, or you speak of like a clear crystal, mind being like a clear crystal with having stains. Stains, they can be removed. They're not in the nature of this crystal. They're not part of the crystal. They're just at the outside, which again is a nice analogy to understand the mind better in terms of the fact that the afflictions are not in the nature of the mind. The misperception is not in the nature of the mind. The mind can exist without those. The mind can perfectly exist without them. They can be removed from the mind and then will never return. Therefore, stains. But when you remove those stains, it's merely labeled, right? So the stainless state is also just labeled on the basis of a particular mind that is free from these objects that obstruct us from reaching what we want. And when that is gone, we label stainless. There's no inherent stain to be found, and therefore there's also no inherent stainless state.
So stain is what leads to suffering.
Wait, I made a mistake. No, stainless here. No, here stainless doesn't mean the conventional stainless. It means an inherent stain. So it's not about the stainless state, because that's not without stain. Right? So stains are that which lead to suffering, exactly. Any kind of affliction that is part of the mind. It doesn't exist inherently as a stain. Yeah, I got confused with this less, because in Tibetan it's really just saying there's no stain, right? There is no stain, which is another way of saying there's no inherent stain. So the less, you can't kind of squeeze the inherent between the stain and so the stain inherent less. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, so here the stains don't exist inherently, and being without stains doesn't exist inherently. So neither the stains nor the stainless state exist inherently. They're all labeled. Does that make sense?
And so the stainless, just to clarify, is just depicting on the conventional sense the natural state of mind.
No, the stainless, exactly. Maybe it's better to say not. There are no stains and there are no non-stains, right? So there are no stains means there are no inherently existent stains. And there's also no state, an inherent stainless state. That would be the second one.
Which is depicting the ultimate, because you're saying...
Exactly. It's all from the point of view of emptiness.
So there's no conventional understanding in this, then?
No, it's just saying, conventionally there's stains, but there's no inherent stain. Conventionally, there is a stainless state, being without stains. That exists conventionally, but not ultimately. Here, it's stressing that there's no inherent stain. There's no inherent freedom from stains. Those are all labeled, again, on the basis of something that are not the stains. Because I got confused. I hope I didn't confuse you as well. Did I confuse you? Yeah, please.
So I wrote it like this, whether it is right or not, please clarify. So there is no inherent stain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being without stainless state is also not there.
Okay, in Tibetan it says Tima meba tima tandewa. Tima means no stains. So tima meba means no stains, no smell actually. That's also, but sometimes the Tibetan word smell can also mean stain. So tima meba means there are no stains. Tima tandewa. Time tandewa. So being free, there's no inherent being free from stainlessness. So in other words, it's saying there's no inherent stains and there's no inherent freedom from stains. Does that make sense? To put it into ordinary English.
This stainlessness is like the cessation of liberation?
Yes, being without stains.
Like inherent cessation or not inherent liberation?
There's a conventional, the stainless state is the cessation of the stains, right? It's the cessation of the stains. But there's no inherent such. Here it's just saying, of course, conventionally exists. There are conventional negativities, and there's a conventional freedom from negativities. And here negativities is another word, another word for stains, really. And on the conventional level, that being the case, but inherently there isn't. Does that make sense? Okay. The next two words, deficient is fine, but fulfilled is, according to my understanding, it's not a good translation. I mean, fulfilled. It's actually better not complete. It's better to say, there is some explanation. So the commentaries sometimes explain the first word, not deficient, to mean there's no decrease, and not fulfilled, no increase. There's no inherent decrease and no inherent increase. Does that make sense? That is sometimes a way you can translate it. That's at least how the commentaries talk about it. First is the stain, that which you want to remove, and the stainless state. But then the increase in good qualities or the decrease of negative qualities, that doesn't exist inherently either. Does that make sense? I give you an example of increase and decrease. But the Tibetan word also allows for these words in Tibetan to also be used in the sense of deficient and complete. There's no inherent deficiency and there's no inherent completion. Both work. Both connotations work. Unfortunately, in English, you have to choose one over the other. So if you get a better sense of the meaning in English here, so either the second last word is, or the second last aspect is deficient, to be deficient, or to decrease. Deficient and decrease. Both words can have both connotations in certain contexts. And the last of the 8 is either being completeness, being complete, or increasing. So the process of becoming complete requires increase. The process that requires deficiency is a decrease. right? So in that sense, both translations work. And it's good to know because you can then reflect on both ideas. Now let's look at gain and loss. Is there inherent gain or loss? Because it has to do with that as well. Gain implies increase, complete. I mean, it's that kind of positivity of getting something. Deficiency has a negative connotation. It goes along with loss. And I find that really interesting because one of the 8 worldly dharmas, 2 of the 8 worldly dharmas are gain and loss. Holding on to gain, wanting to gain, and not wanting to lose. Now check your own mind. The last time you felt you lost money. Let's say 1,000 rupees dropped out of your purse. How do you feel? Bummer, right? Or to give you another example, you changed money. Today you changed money. You get, I don't know, whatever, dollars. I have no idea what the exchange rate is, but let me just make something up. So you change dollars, you change $10, and you get what, 800 rupees? Sounds about right? Yeah, 800 rupees. Tomorrow, someone tells you, if you change money, you get what? 1,000 rupees. 200 rupees, all cup of coffee. I could have changed tomorrow. Bummer, right? Okay. It's kind of like, if it's 200, we're not that. But if it's like 10,000, depending on how much you changed. So like you find out the next day it's a lot more. Okay? Today you change $10. Tomorrow you get much more for whatever reason. Bummer. Or you get a lot less tomorrow. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad I changed today. From tomorrow onwards, you get the same money, same amount. You get 800 rupees in both cases. But in one case, you're elated. In the other case, you're like, loss. In one case, you have the sense, I gained. Is there an inherent gain or loss? You got the same money. You got the same money. So it shows gain and loss is always in relation to something else. I could have, would have, could have, you know? So it's always in relation to, or yesterday, maybe yesterday they gave so much for it and today the dollar went down, loss. Or yesterday you got only very little and today suddenly the spike. And you're like, wow. Does that make sense? Incredible, isn't it? It's the same money. And in one case it's a gain, in one case it's a loss. So reflecting on that is really helpful because it's always in relation to, we compare to someone else. When was the last time you had a sense of, oh, I lost money? Well, compared to someone who has even less, who lost even more, right? And then it's all a matter of perspective. Yeah, gaining and losing. Or I lose something, I don't know, something that has kept me really busy. On one hand, ooh, I could use this gadget to look things up and it was helpful. But on the other hand, now you have time to meditate. Right? Is it a gain? Is it a loss? Depends. Right? So there's no inherent gain or loss. But it seems that way when we try to avoid it. When we're like, oh, you don't want to lose, right? Because there's no sense, it's just a matter of perspective. It's just a matter of in relation to this, that, and the other. Right? It's just like we say here, this piece of wood, is it long or short? It's neither. It's neither long nor short. It all depends. Similarly, gain and loss is just like that. It's even more obvious than other things, right? Pleasure and displeasure and so forth. I mean, even pleasure and displeasure. The pleasure and displeasure we're attached to is pleasure in relation to a worse suffering. That's all it is. It's not the kind of happiness you experience once you attain nirvana. Have you ever been in a situation, every day is the same, the sun rises, let's say it rains. Okay, a lot of people don't like rain. The monsoon is my favorite season, but I've noticed I'm one of the few who says that. So, but the point is, like, let's say it's just an ordinary monsoon day. It's moldy, and so forth. The sun doesn't, well, may rise, but I have no idea where it is right now. There's some fog, your shoes are wet, your socks are wet, and so forth. And so it's like one of those days, and you feel miserable. That's one example. Then you were extremely sick for the last week, and today it's the first day you feel better. What a wonderful day! My socks are wet, my shoes are wet, it's foggy and rainy. Same day, but experienced very differently. Why? Because you had a worse suffering before. And the absence of that worse suffering is experienced as bliss. Right? Or let's say you didn't get any food. For days you didn't get any food. And today you have this splendid meal right in front of you. Your socks are moldy, your shoes are moldy, the sun is not. What a wonderful day. Right? Or your best friend comes. It's all in relation to what was not there before, how you felt previously. Right? A worse suffering. And of course the classic example. You're in the shadow, it's so cold in the shadow, it's so freezing, right? As opposed to, so the temperature in the shadow is, let's say, 15 degrees. No, you've just been out in the sun for an hour, 40 degrees, and you walk into the shadow. Bliss, 15 degrees. 15 degrees is bliss, right? If it was real bliss, just stay there. It should get greater. After an hour, 15 degrees. You walk into the sun, 40 degrees. Right? None of those are real happiness. They're all in the nature of suffering, because if you were to stay in those 40 degrees for, I don't know, an hour, suffering arises again. It's that first moment. That's why we keep changing. Okay? I sit in the same position and I go, how nice. Right? Right? Okay. But before long, I need to leave this room. I need to eat, and then I need to stop to eat. And I need to leave the room I'm eating in. I need to lie down, but I need to get up again. And I need to have a shower, but I need to stop that shower at some point before my skin turns into that of a frog or whatever, and so forth. Right? Right? It's all in relation to what was there before. I haven't seen my friends. Okay, I can't be without them. I'm so happy my friends are here. Oh, after a few days, I'm so glad they're leaving. Right? That is, going back to the 8 worldly dharmas, gain, loss, totally relative. Pleasure, displeasure, in relation to something greater suffering, sorry, not greater. In relation to a worse experience, I now label pleasure. It's only pleasure because a worse sensation that I call pain has just stopped. That's why. It itself is not pleasure, because if it were, then without this previous problem, so without being sick the day before, I should experience this as happiness, but I don't. It's just because that physical problem is now gone. That's why right now I experience it as well-being. Right? Isn't that fascinating? And then talk about reputation. No, gain, no, praise and criticism. We try everything to avoid criticism, and we won't be praised. Praise is totally relative. First of all, is it good or bad? Well, if I have a tendency to become arrogant, I don't want to be praised, right? Arrogance just takes off, haughtiness, arrogance, it takes off. And how greatly disappointed when you realize it's just made up in your mind that you're this great person, right? Great disappointment, just ordinary. They just praised me. Maybe just to get something or whatever, right? I mean, honestly, we all have limitations. The grass always seems greener on the other side. Just go there and you see it's just the same color. Look closer. The neighbor always seems happier. This family needs better. This person seems to... No. Unless they're Buddha and enlightened or whatever. No way, right? So praise, first of all, the one thing I require can actually increase my suffering because it covers my faults to my own appearance. That's why a lot of those successful people, as long as they receive a certain amount of praise, they're on top of the world. But when their fame wanes, the whole identity is fashioned on the praise of others. It's dependent on the praise of others. And if it's gone, they can't deal with it. They may, I don't know, they may take to drugs just to ease the pain. Whatever else they do. They feel terribly, there's no sense in their life. What goes up has to come down. Right? You're on top of the world, but for the wrong reasons. And so that praise can be extremely harmful. Clarification?
Yeah, like with respect to increase and decrease, then how do I justify...
Oh, we come to that. We come to that. Yes, we come to that. I'm still going through the 8 worldly dharmas and want to point out that relativity, and then I go back to the aspect. So if I don't answer it, please just shout. Okay? Please say something. Okay? But I just want to end, since I started with them. So gain and loss, it's relativity we've seen. Pleasure and displeasure, we've seen that. These are also part of the 8 worldly dharmas. And then there is, like I said, praise versus criticism. Criticism, which we may not like, it doesn't make us worse. It doesn't make us worse. But we don't want to hear it. And it's so good to hear our shortcomings. I mean, if the other person is wrong, they just made a mistake. It's not a big deal. They say I'm blue in my face, but I'm not. Right? If someone said, oh my God, you're all green in your face, and I take a mirror and I go, no, don't worry, right? I look in the mirror and that's it, fine. Oh my God, you're all green. No, I'm not green. So like, they were just wrong, or they, I don't know, took the mickey out of me or whatever, right? So, therefore, if they make a mistake, I can check, and if they're wrong, okay. But if they're right, wow, that's an opportunity for me to change, because I don't want to have negative qualities. The qualities that they criticize within me, or they criticize when it comes to me, then, well, those qualities, if I don't want to have them, that gives me the opportunity to change. I can only change something if I'm aware of it. So in that sense, praise and criticism can be very helpful, but also it's always in relation to something. In relation to what? Someone may praise me for something that is pretty meaningless, right? What do I care? I can stand on one leg for an hour. I mean, something, if you don't care about it, you don't care. I mean, it's actually, how important is it, really? For some person it's important, or for me it's extremely important that but how important is that really in life? Being praised for having a beautiful voice. Some people, I mean, it's really important nowadays to have a good voice, all these talent shows and stuff, right? You Google something and you get Simon Cowell, like, who's this guy? Why is he always popping up, right? I mean, it's these singers. So it seems to be so important, but is that really that important, being praised for a good voice? Isn't it more important? I mean, I'm talking from a Buddhist point of view. I'm talking from the point of view of long-term happiness. Is a good voice going to give me long-term happiness? I mean, at the age of 70 or 80, I'd probably be, right, gone. I already have this voice now, but, you know, at least for those who have a good voice, it won't be with them endlessly. So if they depend on that kind of praise, how important is it? And if someone praises you for being so compassionate and you're not yet a Buddha, well, there's still work to be done. Don't get so caught in that. It's just a relative, yeah, it's great, it's better than others, but there's still much more I need to do. So again, yeah. So how helpful is the praise? How helpful can criticism be? And also, what is being praised? Is that really worth the praise? In terms of the criticism, is it such a big deal? Okay, right? It may not be actually a fault. If I'm not the best cook in the world, what do I care? Only I have to eat my food, and I don't know any better. Or you go to Tushita. Okay, so, and then what else? Good reputation, bad reputation. I mean, a good reputation among Buddhas or among serial killers. Again, it depends on good reputation in what area, right? I mean, who are the people? Who are the people in dependence on or in relation to who I have a good reputation, or I have a good reputation? The whole world? The whole world, they don't know me, right? If somehow the whole world tomorrow thinks I'm a great person, they're simply wrong. They don't know me. I don't know where they get it from. Twitter or TikTok or whatever there is, right? They don't know any. It's just someone said it. They just believe it. I don't even have a good reputation. They just believe it. They don't know. They don't know what I'm like. So again, what's the big deal that some people have the thought, she's nice, for instance. It's just a thought that pops up every now and then without them really knowing my negativities, right? They don't know me. I may pretend to be nice. Buddhists are good at that. Honestly, I meet so many monks and nuns. They're so nice at the outside. They go out of their way doing these nice, but inside, there's still work to be done, just as in my own case, right? We try to at the outside, but inside, showing off a little bit here and there, just kind of mention it at the side, right? It's really obvious. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time, right? Yeah. So the thing is, therefore, it's a change that comes from within. That's what counts. And if no one sees it, who cares? I know this really good practitioner that I didn't think he was such a great practitioner. Our priest director, before he passed away, there was this monk coming to him all the time. And he was so nice and so kind. It was almost like it's too much. Terrible in my mind, oh gosh, He seemed like over the top nice and a little bit, not very educated, and he couldn't care less. And no one really respected him. No one really, like the other monks, so they just thought he was an uneducated, little bit naive person. But that's not who he was. He was this incredible practitioner, and he didn't care about his reputation. So he just manifested in that way. And when he died, he stayed in the clear light. He did this incredible meditation for a long, he expressed, there were all these signs that he was a special practitioner, but no one knew. We were all like, oh my God, right? Didn't think of him highly. He wasn't doing that whole oh, I'm this, I'm that. No one knew about his qualities. He never talked about himself, what he had done, no, he never. And there he was. Those are the real practitioners. And in Tibetan society, there are these high lamas, and oftentimes they have wives who are never in the forefront. Never. They're always in the back. They never talk about what they've done, never. It's always about others. But that is their practice. That's also part of that's who they are. They don't need to be in the limelight, right? They could be, but in this lifetime, they choose this kind of existence where they're always in the back, but they have the access to the Dharma, and they really don't need the attention. They don't need the attention. Okay. So then if someone is praised for being always in the center, those are usually the people who are with the center of attention. They are the ones, who get the praise. But the ones who are quiet and don't say, and seem to be totally insignificant, and the true practitioners, those who they are. They go off somewhere and no one sees them for years and forgets they even exist, right? They have no good reputation. And then when certain qualities have developed, they get a good reputation, but it's because they have these qualities of true love, of true compassion and so forth. And that's when it counts, and that's when they don't care. Well, what do they care? Good reputation. They're of benefit to others. So you see, we have to all put this into perspective. It's all relative. It's all relative. Yeah? It doesn't mean... So it's important to watch your own mind. But let's take a break. I've really talked for a long time. Suddenly an hour and a half, much longer than that. I hope your legs are still... Yeah, okay. Please, let's take a break. Take a break. 15 minutes will do. And I'll take questions, yes.